Good morning, beloveds. So that you missed it because I didn't have the camera on yet, but Foster was standing on my leg, rubbing the stand, and he's standing right on my bruise. And I'm just like, really, of all the places you could stand, gonna stand on that bruise? I keep finding new bruises. I have, you may be able to see that this hand is pretty bruised. The good news is that most of the stiffness has come out. So I guess the rest of the bruise is going to have to work itself out, and then the stiffness will go away the rest of the way. But he was standing on my bruise, and I'm like, really? Of all the places you could stand. But, you know, it is what it is, right? I found another bruise further down on my calf, and my knee's tender, but not bruised. So, it's just been an experience, all in all. Okay, but that's not what you're here for. What you are here for is the Beyond Appearances, October 13th, and our title is The Divine Imprint. It's kind of cloudy out there. There's no sun. I'm just going to use the glasses. Okay, so the first quote is, "And this is life eternal, that they might know thee." And that is John 17:3. The next quote is, "We enter the one through a consciousness of unity with it." And that is The Science of Mind, page 499. In the book of Romans, in the Bible, we can read the Apostle Paul's response to the question, "Who shall separate us from the love of Christ?" In his statement of faith, we hear the strong conviction that absolutely nothing can come between us and the love of Christ, not even death. And that is Romans 8:38, if you want to go look it up. This goes beyond belief, beyond thinking, and can become as so much a part of daily living that I'm currently offline. Okay, I don't know where I went offline, so let me just back up a little bit. All right. Actually, I'll just start the whole thing over. Not the quotes. You already got the quotes. Okay, so in the book of Romans, in the Bible, we can read the Apostle Paul's response to the question, "Who shall separate us from the love of Christ?" In his statement of faith, we hear the strong conviction that absolutely nothing can come between us and the love of Christ, not even death, and that is Romans 8:38. This goes beyond belief, beyond thinking, and become as so much a part of daily living that anyone who professes such faith knows the true reality behind everything. We human beings are created in the image and likeness of God, and as Dr. Holmes points out, the greater our consciousness of indwelling I am, the more fully we live. There is no place we can go where we are separated from our Creator. There is nothing we could ever do which could cause God to forsake us or stop caring for us. We carry the divine imprint within us. The Christ lives in everyone, but only as we become aware of this fact do we begin to know this great and loving presence. We need to daily recognize the Christ in ourselves and everybody we see, and to remember that this is the gift of a living God. When we know then we can know we are one with all people, and that our life is unending, even as we make the transition from our earthly life into the next stage of our spiritual growth. Nothing can separate us from the love of the one who knows us best and loves us most. I know that the Christ lives within all of God's children, and we can never be separated from this divine presence. I open myself to live fully in this knowledge, and I am truly blessed. And that is J.A. Jean Anderson. Okay, so there is nothing we could ever do which would cause God to forsake us or stop caring for us. That line right there. And what Reverend Jesse would tell you there is the same thing he tells you about why God doesn't judge us. Because we're not outside of God. We are in the side of God. We are part of God. We are made of God. So that's why God can't judge us, which is the reason God can't stop caring for us. God cannot forsake us because we are within God. Like, there's nothing but God, right? So that if there's nothing but God, then we are within God. Therefore, God cannot forsake us, because God cannot separate us from God. And when you think about that for a minute, you go, okay. But that's one of the reasons why science of mind focuses on the divine imprint, the divine pattern, and moves away from the divine personality. When you look at world mythology and the various ways that, multitudes of cultures have defined God, what we tend to do with God is we blow God up into just bigger versions of people. And people, we have our flaws. We do have our flaws. We make mistakes. And so, if we blow God up into bigger versions of ourselves, then of course God can make mistakes and has flaws and has, a temper. And none of that is true. None of that is true. What I appreciate about the Hindu religion is that the Hindu religion said there's one God. There's Brahma. There's nothing but Brahma. But Brahma is too big for us to encompass. And so when I need to deal with God, I need to deal with a specific aspect of God. Well, then I'm just going to deal with, and I'm going to name that aspect of God. And so when you are dealing with the variety of gods in the Hindu religion, the Hindus recognize they're not separate gods. They're just simply aspects of the one God, because we are small and we are not capable of encompassing all of God. Therefore, we deal with God on a smaller level. And so that was their way of doing it. The Catholics did something very similar, and they said, well, there's God, and then God's Son, and the Holy Spirit. Oh, and we have all of these saints. And whatever it is, because it's along the same idea, except they didn't call their saints gods. What they said was, well, this is the aspect, because you have a saint for this and a saint for that, and all these different saints, and they all are for different things. It's kind of the same idea. It's like, okay, well, this is what I need from God, so I'm going to go to this saint because this is the aspect of God that I need to engage. So kind of creative there. And so, but that's kind of that. How do you deal with something that is so overwhelming? Well, most of us don't. We pick a small piece and go, well, this is what I'm going to deal with. And that's how you end up, what's the old joke? How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So not that I would want to eat an elephant, but yeah. And she talks about the divine imprint and what the Christ consciousness. And so the point of spiritual practice is that, are you going to come stand on my bruise again? The point of spiritual practice is that. The point of spiritual practice is to consciously engage with spirit, with God, with the Christ consciousness. If we are made by God, of God, for God, we come pre-installed. Can you tell I'm the daughter of an engineer? We come pre-installed with the Christ software. And the good news is the password is easy, because the password is simply love. All right. And so that is how we access the Christ consciousness, by loving ourselves, by loving each other, by recognizing that each and every one of us is a beloved child of God, no matter how we're behaving. And that God loves each and every one of us, will not ever forsake any of us, mostly because it can't. It doesn't want to, but it also can't. So, there's never, God never looks at us when we're behaving badly and goes, I don't want you anymore. God doesn't do that. God, God is, I don't know. I don't know what I was going to say there. Because God does judge. We're not outside of God, And I'm not going to say that God doesn't notice, because we've all been hit by the spiritual 2x4s when we've been behaving badly. It's like, oh, okay, I'm up again. And it's not a judgment from God. That's simply us getting out of alignment. And when you get out of alignment, you rub up against stuff. that you wouldn't rub up against if you were in alignment. Look at any machine. If everything is running smooth and everything's in alignment, it's working. And one thing gets just slightly off alignment and everything goes, So, that's not God's judgment. That's just the way the world works. So the point of spiritual practice is to consciously engage with that Christ consciousness, to explore that, to feel that, and to feel that divine presence, to go into that divine love, to go into that all-encompassing love, to touch just even the hem of the garment, because that's kind of what it's like. At least that's the way I imagine it, is when we touch the hem of the garment, when we go into spiritual practice and we consciously engage in that practice, we're touching the hem of the garment. We can't encompass the whole garment. But just as Jesus noticed when somebody touched the hem of his garment, God notices when we touch the hem of the garment. And God isn't angry about the loss of the power. In fact, God turns to us and says, and there you are. Welcome. And there you are. Welcome. Because when we take two steps towards God, God runs to us. So when we touch the hem of the garment, God turns around. That is what spiritual practice is. That's why we do it every day. And we have a variety of different ways of doing it. That's the beautiful thing about spiritual practice. It's not a one size fits all. It's like when I like the question of how many paths to God are there? Well, how many people are there in the world? How many living beings are there in the world? How many sentient living beings are there in the world? That's how many paths there are to God. There's not just one way. And that's the way of spiritual practice. You work until you find what works for you. And the good news is you can use more than one. So if you find one that really works and that's what you want to do, more power to you. But if you find that you want to rotate through a number of different ones because that works for you, then that's great. The only thing I would caution you about is doing too many, because it's possible. We do have material lives to live. And even the most holy of holies, the Pope or the Dalai Lama, all of them, Reverend Desmond Tutu, who's no longer with us, Thich Nhat Hanh, who's again no longer with us, they all had material existence. They had regular stuff they had to do. So so it'd be curious to know how a bulk of, how much of it did they spend in spiritual practice and how much of it did they spend in their regular material lives? And it's not that we can't bring a tinge of our spiritual practice to our material lives. In fact, it's great when we do everything consciously. But, we're not monks living in monasteries or nuns living in convents. And even they still had to scrub floors and wash dishes. So we can do everything with a spiritual consciousness, but so don't overwhelm yourself with spiritual practices is my point. All right. Bring an aspect of spiritual consciousness to everything that you do, but don't overwhelm yourself with spiritual practices. Do what you need to do. Do exactly as much as you need to do, and don't let anybody tell you how much it's supposed to be, because you will know what's right for you. Okay, so I don't even know if I covered what she was talking about. I think I did. So our spiritual, our mission today, should we choose to accept it? She's got this line: we human beings are created in the image and likeness of God. And as Dr. Holmes points out, the greater our consciousness of the indwelling I am, the more fully we live. So So she says, the Christ lives in everyone, but only as we become aware of this fact do we begin to know this great and loving presence. We need to daily recognize ourselves. And so when she goes down into the treatment, she says, I know that Christ lives in all of God's children, and we can never be separated from this presence. I open myself to live fully in this knowledge, and I am truly blessed. And so I would tell you that the mission today, should we choose to accept it, is to look in each set of eyes that we meet today, including our own when we look in the mirror, and see God looking back at us. See the Christ looking back at us. Be aware of that indwelling presence. And, dare I say, let it leak. Let it leak. You are a divine channel for that love of God. You are a divine channel for that Christ consciousness. If you're not ready to open up the flow, let it leak. Let it trickle through everything you do today. And as you practice that, you'll find it'll go from a drip to a trickle, from a trickle to a stream, until everything you do is touched by that Christ consciousness. Everything you do. Because the next thing I'm going to suggest, which is the spiritual practice of doing something loving for yourself, doing something kind for yourself, doing something compassionate for yourself, is also about that. It is about creating a first response. It's about, no matter what happens, that you respond lovingly, kindly, compassionately. That you can choose a response instead of a reaction. Monday, that I chose a response instead of a reaction. I could have been very angry. I could have been very upset. I was mostly shocked. Nobody expects to end up on the ground. But yes, I was the one who was injured, but I reassured the people whose dog it was that I was okay, and that it would be okay, and that they were going to be okay. And the reason that I could do that was because I have done the work. I've done the work. I've worked on myself so that my response could be loving, kind, and compassionate with others as well as with myself. Because when she comes over to haul me off the ground, I'm like, no, wait, give me just a minute. So I took the minute to realign myself. And that's what I'm talking about. When we do this kind of work on ourselves, when things happen, we have that bank to draw on. Okay? So that loving, kind, compassionate thing that I ask you to do every day is one about self-care. It is absolutely about self-care. It is about taking care of yourself. You cannot pour from an empty cup. It is also about making sure that you're enjoying life. God wants us to be happy. And so when we practice love, kindness, and compassion on ourselves, then we can we can enjoy life, and we can encourage others to enjoy life. Because that's what we're here to do. So remember, you will never look in the eyes of someone that God does not love, including your own. So practice. It makes permanent. It makes for that first response. It makes for that bank, so that no matter what happens, you can respond as the loving child of God that you are, to the children of God that you are in situations with. So, all right. I can feel my allergies. I love fall. I actually do enjoy fall, but this part of it, ragweed is high. Okay. So you got that. You've got your mission. You've got your, loving, kind, compassionate practice on yourself. As always, I do encourage you to do something to engage your mind and your body, whatever that looks like today. I do encourage you to drink plenty of water. I think we had a cool front come through, but it's still going to be almost 90 today. Turn the thermostat down just a little bit. So, I know where I live. Drink plenty of water, hydrate. It's super important. And make sure that you get bright light early in your day to reset those circadian rhythms. It will help you sleep better at night. It will give you, you'll have more energy during the day. It's science. Look it up. Circadian rhythms are a thing. And they start with a C, I think. I don't think I could spell it if you asked me to, but, and as always, in the words of Ernest Holmes, open the windows of your soul. Allow the breath of heaven to remind you, you do live in heaven right here, right now. It's all around you all of the time. It is our superpower because it's a state of mind. It's a state of consciousness. It is something that we can and should practice. Put ourselves in that indwelling presence, fill up on that love, and bring that love back into the material world that we live in and share. All right? It's a commandment. Love one another as I have loved you. So, all right. And as always, you can take Emma's advice and look for the good and praise it. All right. Okay. So social media. We are Creative Life Spiritual Center, Creative Life Spark. I am the running Rev Ryan on the social medias that I am on. I do encourage you to like, share, do all that stuff. Because we've got great content. If you want to know what's going on with the center, the book studies, the classes, there's a show coming up. We've got a food market event coming up. That will be, so email, allergies, email info@creativelife.org. That will get you on the constant contact, and the hot links are hot. So it'll take you right to where, whatever it is that you need to know. Which reminds me, I need to email David. Sorry, as I think. This is what I know. And I'm going to tell you to have or encourage you to have a great day, a wondrous day, a fantastic day, a magical day, an enchanting day, a healing day, a divine imprint day, a loving day, a wondrous day, a wonderful day, a good day. And if that is too much pressure, simply have a day, because you are enough just as you are. You are a beloved child of God, in whom God is well pleased and well represented always. Always. We're made in the image of God. So take care of yourself. Know that you are loved. Reverend David will be on around 5 p.m. with you. I'll be back with you at 9 a.m.-ish. Neither of us are quite on the dot there. But that's okay. We've been doing this for a couple of years. We got this. And I will see you next time.